Was it reckless or inevitable, the way she had walked straight into the storm? Rain plastered her hair to her shoulders, mascara running like ink on fragile paper. And he saw her so impossibly small under the wrath of the sky that something inside him fractured. Alexander Vale never noticed women in peril. He noticed numbers, boardrooms, and contracts. Yet tonight, lightning had struck twice, once in the sky, once in his chest. He grabbed her elbow, pulling her under the awning of his penthouse, his designer coat clinging damply to her, heat radiating where their skin brushed. She shivered, not entirely from the cold, and he hated himself for wanting it to be him who made her tremble. His apartment smelled of expensive bourbon and old leather, but she smelled of rain and something intoxicatingly alive, and every rational thought he'd ever had about control evaporated with the storm. She stared at him, eyes wide, defiance still flickering despite the storm. "Who are you?" she asked, voice breaking like the rain outside. Alexander wanted to lie, to spin her some convenient story about his wealth and influence, but the truth crawled up his spine and lodged itself in his throat. She had no idea who he was, not really. Not that it mattered, he wasn't here for introductions. He was here because every muscle in his body screamed that he shouldn't let her out of his sight. "Alexander Vale," he said finally, voice low, controlled, and she flinched, as though the name itself was dangerous. The velvet darkness of his apartment wrapped around them, the storm outside blurring the edges of reality. Her heart was hammering. His was threatening to betray him entirely. Her coat clung to her body, soaked and trembling, and he stepped closer, letting the warmth of his tailored suit brush hers. She flinched under his closeness, and he wanted to reach out, but the rules he'd spent a lifetime building walls around whispered no. Still, his hand hovered near her arm, hesitant, a predator testing the ground before a strike. She smelled of lilacs and rain-drenched streets, utterly unrefined, entirely irresistible. He wanted her to run, to vanish like a phantom from his impossible life, yet every fiber of his being ached to tether her to this penthouse. To him, the storm pounded on the windows as if echoing the chaos inside him, and he realized the first danger wasn't the rain, it was her effect on him. "You can't stay here," she whispered, voice trembling, fingers clenching the fabric of her skirt. Alexander's laugh was quiet, a dangerous sound that didn't reach his eyes. "And why not? I saved you from drowning," he said, letting the words hang heavy, insinuating. The heat in his tone made her pulse catch, and she hated herself for it. Every syllable between them carried tension, a slow burn that neither dared extinguish. Her heels clicked nervously against the marble floor as she tried to step back, but the storm had left her stranded, her pride at war with desire. He could see the war behind her eyes, and it thrilled and terrified him simultaneously. The penthouse smelled of rain-damp silk and polished mahogany as Alexander poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed her one, and she hesitated, trembling fingers brushing his as she took it. Their eyes locked, a magnetic current crackling in the tiny space between them. She was beautiful in a raw, unpolished way, and he was lethal in his refinement. The collision of worlds was inevitable. "Why me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loud would shatter the fragile bubble. "Why now?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. He wanted to confess that he'd been watching her, that some irrational part of him had been waiting for this storm, but he held back, savoring the tension, letting it coil tighter. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the sharp lines of his jaw and the way her dress clung to her like liquid midnight. He wanted to reach out and brush her hair from her face, but the businesslike part of him, always dominant, always controlled, warned against indulgence. Still, he leaned slightly closer, letting his breath touch her cheek, an intimate brush that made her shiver. She wanted to pull away, but her body betrayed her, leaning just enough to feel him closer. The storm outside became a symphony to the unsaid words between them, every crash of thunder a punctuation mark on their dangerous chemistry. "You're impossible," she murmured, though her lips betrayed the lie with their slight quiver. He studied her as she sipped the drink, amber liquid trembling in her hands like she might vanish if she wasn't careful. Her eyes found his, and he swore he could drown in them. Alexander Vale never lost control until now. He had rules, contracts, and boundaries that defined every corner of his empire, yet she existed in a world outside them, untamed and unpredictable. The way she tilted her head, questioning him, daring him, sparked something primal he hadn't felt in years. Every instinct screamed to pull her close, to claim the stormy night and her trembling form as his. Yet another part, sharp and rational, reminded him of his vow. Alexander Vale never fell for anyone. The rain softened outside, turning from violent to steady, but inside, tension thickened. Alexander circled the grand living room, deliberate steps that mirrored a predator stalking prey, while she sipped her drink with a fragile grace that made him ache. "You don't understand who I am," he said finally, voice dropping so low it vibrated across her skin. She looked up, eyes wide, lips parting. "Try me," she dared, and the challenge hit him like a jolt of electricity. She wasn't afraid, not really, just defiant, and he wanted to break through that armor while preserving the spark that made her dangerous, irresistible. Suddenly her phone buzzed, a message lighting up the polished surface of the marble table. She glanced at it, and Alexander saw the flicker of fear cross her face. Something about the message unsettled her in a way he hadn't anticipated, and his protective instincts flared. He should step back, remain the untouchable billionaire, but he couldn't. "Who is it?" he asked, voice almost soft, betraying a hint of concern he would never admit publicly. She hesitated, a dangerous pause that made the air between them heavy with unspoken truth. Alexander's pulse raced, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he could maintain the distance he'd sworn to keep. He moved closer again, enough that her breath hitched under his gaze. She tried to retreat, but the wet silk of her dress made her movements slow, deliberate. His hand hovered near her waist, and he didn't care about propriety, only proximity, the tension, electric and alive. "Whatever it is, I can handle it," he murmured, voice low, commanding. She glanced at him, the vulnerability in her eyes threatening the icy control he worked so hard to maintain. She wanted to say yes, to accept his offer, but her lips pressed together, a secret shield she wasn't ready to lower. A clap of thunder shook the room, and he laughed softly, a dangerous sound. "The storm isn't over," he said, eyes darkening with desire and something deeper. She didn't respond, only stared, caught in a whirlpool of attraction she couldn't name. Her heartbeat filled the silence, the space between them almost unbearable. He wanted to take her in his arms, feel her tremble beneath him, but the businesslike side of him, the side that controlled empires and contracts, stopped him barely. And yet, that restraint made her ache all the more. She was a puzzle he wanted to solve with fire. Their eyes locked again, unspoken rules breaking, and she dared a step closer, just enough for him to feel the warmth of her body. Alexander's hand twitched, hovering near her cheek, and the storm outside mirrored the chaos inside. Neither wanted to speak, both knowing words would ruin this delicate dance. Every stolen glance, every inch of space closing between them, built tension so thick it threatened to ignite. Then the doorbell rang, sharp, intrusive, a harsh cut through the fragile bubble. They both froze, the electricity between them crashing against reality. Alexander's jaw tightened. Whoever it was, would change everything. The storm had passed, but Alexander couldn't shake the pulse of tension that lingered like fog. Days had blurred into late nights filled with quiet conversations and stolen glances. She was no longer the trembling stranger in the rain. She moved through his penthouse with a confidence that both thrilled and unnerved him. He caught her in the library, fingers brushing over the spine of a rare book, and he stood behind her, close enough to feel the warmth of her hair, inhale the faint hint of vanilla under her perfume. His hand hovered near hers, a breath away from a touch that would have ignited them both. "You read like you think too much," he murmured, voice low, and she glanced at him over her shoulder, heat flaring in her cheeks. Her heartbeat betrayed her as much as his desire did, the room shrinking around them until nothing existed but the electricity sparking in the space between their bodies. At the charity gala, she shimmered under crystal chandeliers in a silver gown that clung like liquid light. Alexander's presence was a shield and a warning. Every man who dared approach her found his eyes dark, dangerous, and unwavering. He moved beside her like a shadow, hand brushing hers in public, a touch fleeting, yet devastating. She laughed, and he caught it, tucked it into the quiet part of himself he rarely allowed anyone to see. But the glittering crowd was a threat. Whispers of deals and betrayals swirled in the air. A familiar voice from his past, sharp and venomous, sliced through the atmosphere, reminding him that the world outside this room would always try to claim her. He wanted to pull her close, to make her forget the crowd, but a voice of duty warned she was unprepared for his enemies, for the empire that clung to him like a second skin. Late at night, the penthouse was quiet, the city lights painting shadows across her face. They sat on the chaise lounge, knees brushing, fingers grazing by accident, yet deliberate enough to leave sparks. She leaned back against him, shoulder to shoulder, and he inhaled the scent of her hair cinnamon, rain, something distinctly hers, and a longing rooted deep in his chest. Words became unnecessary. Every glance, every subtle movement carried unspoken confessions. Yet Alexander fought the urge to confess all. His wealth, his danger, the enemies who would destroy anyone who came too close. Still, the walls he built around himself were crumbling, brick by brick, and he felt like a fool to let her see the vulnerable edges he had hidden from the world. She smiled softly, as if sensing the fracture lines beneath his control, and his pulse raced in recognition. She discovered at first the truth hidden behind his perfect life. A file on her chair, subtle yet impossible to ignore, revealed his identity beyond Alexander Vale, the billionaire mogul, ruthless in business, untouchable in society. Shock tightened her chest, betrayal swirling in the amber glow of his library. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice trembled, fragile yet accusing. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, catching her hand palm warm against hers, yet the gap between honesty and deception yawned. "Because I wanted you to see me first, not him," he said, voice rough, admitting more than he intended. Her eyes flicked up, searching his, seeking the truth in a world defined by falsehoods. The revelation shattered the fragile trust they had been building, leaving tension thicker than the night outside. Enemies appeared in the most subtle ways. A rival CEO's threat tucked into a dinner invitation, a stranger whispering her name in the shadows of his gala. Alexander's protective instincts flared, his hand lingered on her back, eyes darting for danger. She felt his grip, firm yet intimate, and the rush of his Cologne-Burger Matsida. Danger left her dizzy. "You don't understand," she murmured, but he did. He saw every risk, every threat she didn't, and he also saw her curiosity, her bravery, the spark that refused to yield. Desire tangled with fear, creating a friction neither could ignore. And when she caught sight of him watching her across the ballroom, desire and danger collided, leaving her heart in jeopardy of surrendering completely to a man who was both salvation and storm. In the privacy of his office, the air smelled of polished oak and leather tinged with her perfume. Fingers brushed over papers, almost touch lingering just long enough to make her pulse spike. She wanted to lean into him, wanted to close the gap, but a stubborn part of her resisted. "Do you even feel anything real, or is this just another game?" she asked, voice small but fierce. Alexander froze, jaw tightening. For years, he had measured life in contracts and power, not in emotions. Yet her question pierced every calculation, leaving him exposed. His hand hovered near hers, almost touching, trembling despite the control he demanded. "Everything with you is real," he confessed, voice low, rasping, the weight of desire and fear entwined. She stared, disbelief mingling with the spark of hope, caught between wanting to trust and fearing the truth. A shadow from her past emerged, and suddenly the fragile equilibrium shattered. A man she hadn't seen in years appeared at the penthouse doorway, eyes dark with familiarity and secrets. His presence a ripple that threatened to drown her newfound trust. Alexander's muscles tensed. Every instinct screamed danger. She stepped back, uncertainty clouding her face, and Alexander closed the space, protective and furious. "Who is he?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the intruder, calculating, silent, deadly. His fingers brushed hers in a brief touch, electric, grounding, warning her that she was no longer alone. The revelation made her world tilt, love and danger intertwined, pulling her heart in directions she wasn't sure she could navigate without being consumed. The confrontation came in the penthouse library, books lining the walls like silent witnesses. She accused him of deception, voice cracking with fear and anger. "You lied to me. How am I supposed to believe anything now?" Alexander's eyes softened but hardened simultaneously, the weight of his empire and the depth of his obsession colliding. He stepped closer, fingers grazing her cheek, warmth and electricity sparking where they touched. "I didn't lie about us," he said, voice low, intense. "I lied to protect you from them, from me, from everything I am that could hurt you." Tears threatened her control, her heart a battleground of rage and longing. The storm outside mirrored their emotions, winds rattling glass, rain hammering the cityscape. She wanted to recoil but couldn't, drawn to him as much as terrified of what surrender might cost. He confessed his obsession in whispers during the quiet after the confrontation, pacing the room with her in his periphery. "I've never wanted anything I couldn't control," he admitted, voice rough, raw, "but you're untamable, and I won't let you go." She shivered, caught between the thrill of his admission and the fear of the life entangled with his. "And what if I can't be yours?" she asked, trembling. He closed the distance, chest brushing hers, heart threatening to betray him with every thump. "Then I'll drown with you," he murmured, the words a promise and a warning. The line between obsession and love blurred in the dim library light, electric and dangerous. The city skyline glimmered outside as they sat on the balcony, rain-soaked streets reflecting neon lights, fingers intertwined, small smiles brushing past pain and distrust. She whispered confessions of dreams she never shared. He revealed fragments of vulnerability, and each revelation stitched a delicate bond between them. Yet every word was laced with danger: the Empire, his enemies, her past, all a looming shadow. When their eyes met, unspoken promises danced in the air, hearts synchronized in silent agreement, even as fear gnawed at their edges. The night wrapped them like velvet, warm, intimate, dangerous. And in that moment, they both knew the storm wasn't over, not outside, not in their hearts, but surrender was inevitable. A rival billionaire's threat landed like a dagger in Alexander's inbox, forcing immediate action. He grabbed her hand instinctively, tension in every line of his body, a silent vow that he wouldn't let the threat reach her. She felt the heat of his palm, the electricity of proximity, and a thrill ran through her, mingling with fear. "You have to trust me," he said, jaw tight, eyes smoldering. She nodded, heart pounding, aware that every choice now carried consequences far beyond their private world. Love had become a battlefield, every touch a weapon, every glance a strategy, and surrender no longer felt simple. Late at night, she caught him in the kitchen, coffee in hand, tired yet impossibly alluring. Silence stretched thick with longing, and she stepped closer. Fingers brushed over mugs, and she felt the tremor in him, faint yet undeniable. "Do you ever wonder if we're insane?" she whispered. "Every day," he admitted, pulling her into an embrace that tasted of midnight and secrets. The kiss hovered on the edge of inevitability, a precipice neither wanted to fall from without certainty. And then, his phone rang, a coded message flashing on the screen, a reminder that danger was always a step behind, threatening to pull them apart even as the world of passion and obsession tightened around them. The turning point came unexpectedly. A confrontation with the intruder revealed her own secret, one that reframed everything Alexander thought he knew. She had connections, knowledge, and stakes in this dangerous world that rivaled his own. Shock twisted into awe, betrayal softened into understanding, and the unspoken connection between them deepened. He realized he didn't just want to protect her, he wanted to fight beside her. Hands brushed, electricity sparking again, eyes locking in mutual recognition of shared destiny. The storm outside mirrored the tumult inside them, fierce and unpredictable. For the first time, neither of them could predict the outcome, but they both knew the path forward would be walked together, in love, obsession, and peril. The penthouse felt smaller than ever. The contract on his desk was due in 3 days. A marriage arrangement designed to bind him to someone of wealth and pedigree, someone safe, respectable. She sat across from him, knees drawn up, eyes reflecting the city lights like twin storms. "I can't be the reason you lose everything," she whispered. Alexander's jaw clenched. He had built empires on logic, on control, on numbers. And yet, here she was, impossible, untamed, rewriting every rule he lived by. He leaned across the table, fingers brushing hers, heart thundering. "Then be my reason," he said, voice low, ragged with desire. Her eyes widened, but the words hung between them like a fragile promise. Outside, the city roared, uncaring. Inside, every heartbeat pulsed with desperate longing, every brush of skin electric, dangerous, and undeniable. Time was running out. They met in the library, the place that had witnessed the slow burn of stolen glances and near confessions. Books towered around them like silent witnesses, the faint scent of old paper mixing with her perfume. His hands hovered near hers, trembling with restraint, almost touch that left both gasping for more. "Every second feels borrowed," she admitted, voice breaking. He nodded, jaw tight, wanting to gather her into his arms and never let go, yet knowing each embrace carried consequences. They pressed close, foreheads touching, the world beyond the library dissolving. A distant siren, a notification on his phone reminded him that empires and enemies existed outside this bubble. She tilted her head, lips dangerously close, and he needed to kiss her, but duty and danger held him back. Desire warred with logic, love with obligation, and the tension stretched taut, threatening to snap. The gala came too soon, glittering under chandeliers, masking threats with elegance. Alexander moved beside her, hand grazing hers, eyes sharp, warning off anyone who dared approach. Her smile was effortless, but beneath it, tension twisted her stomach. Every whispered deal, every glinting watch, every calculating glance in the crowd reminded them both of the walls that separated desire from reality. She laughed, and his pulse caught, wanted to hold her, shield her from the world that demanded submission. But the gala wasn't safe. A rival from his past lingered nearby, eyes predatory, and Alexander knew every touch. Every look between them was now a silent challenge. They were a heartbeat away from surrender and disaster at the same time. Every stolen moment tasted of forbidden fire. Every second mattered. Late that night, the penthouse balcony became a refuge. Rain-slicked glass reflected neon lights, city noise muted by the storm above. She leaned against him, shoulder-brushing chest, warmth bleeding through damp clothes. Fingers intertwined, hearts racing. They shared quiet confessions of what they felt but could not say aloud. "I can't lose you," he murmured. She shook her head, voice trembling. "We're not supposed to be together. Not like this." Every syllable cut through the fog of longing, yet neither could move away. The rain fell harder, drumming on the balcony, echoing their tumultuous desire. When he brushed wet hair from her face, eyes locked, the air thick with electric tension. Time itself seemed to hold its breath, and in that charged silence, they both knew a choice had to be made. Alexander's family arrived unexpectedly, demanding he attend a meeting about the impending contract. The room smelled of polished leather and entitlement, voices sharp with expectation. She lingered by the doorway, eyes flashing fear and defiance. "You can't just throw everything away," she said, voice low. He turned to her, gaze molten, gripping her hands. "You're worth it," he said. No one else existed in that moment. Not the empire, not the contract, not the scrutiny. Her breath hitched, but logic clawed at her. Duty, reputation. Every societal expectation screamed for distance. Yet the fire in his eyes drew her like a moth. They shared a stolen, desperate kiss before she was pushed behind the crowd, leaving him standing there, torn between duty and obsession, love and survival. A text arrived, threats veiled in business jargon, rivals exploiting vulnerabilities. He gripped her hand under the table at dinner, subtle yet grounding. Her pulse matched his. Frantic, desperate. "We can't stop now," she whispered. The restaurant's candles flickered, shadows dancing across their skin, casting intimacy into sharp relief against the lurking danger. Every brush of fingers became electric, every shared glance a confession, every heartbeat a reminder that time was slipping. He leaned closer, whispering promises she could barely believe. "I'm not letting anyone take you from me." Outside, a car door slammed, a reminder that the world beyond their bubble was unrelenting. They had hours, maybe minutes, and every second demanded surrender, yet courage, and trust in a love that defied reason. The night of the contract's final deadline arrived. Papers sprawled across Alexander's office, pen poised to sign, empire hanging in balance. She entered quietly, wet from rain, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Don't do this," she pleaded, hand brushing his sleeve. Every calculation in his mind screamed yes, but her gaze, fierce and soft at once, unmade every rule he had built. He set the pen down, trembling, heart on fire. "You're more important than all of it," he confessed, voice low, breaking the professional facade. She stepped closer, feeling the tremor in his chest, the heat of his hand over hers. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, explosive, inevitable, and transformative. In that moment, choice was no longer abstract. It was raw, urgent, and irrevocable. They fled to the balcony, rain drenching their clothes, mingling with tears and laughter. City lights blurred into streaks, wind whipping around them. He pressed her to him, wet hair clinging, hands firm on her back. "No more hiding," he said, teeth grazing her ear. "No more pretending." She clutched him, trembling but the world. He silenced her with a kiss, electric, consuming, all doubts melting away. Thunder rolled overhead as if applauding their defiance. The empire, the contracts, the family pressures all faded in the weight of a single embrace. Desire and love collided, every nerve alive, every heartbeat shared. And for the first time, surrender didn't feel dangerous. It felt inevitable, right, unstoppable. The first fight came hours later, tension spilling over exhaustion. "Do you even know who you're becoming?" she demanded, voice breaking. "Do you understand what giving in to me means?" Alexander's chest heaved, a storm contained, eyes dark, raw. "I know exactly what it means," he said, fingers brushing hers, tracing trembling lines along her arm. "It means I finally choose myself through you." Her eyes filled with tears, body trembling with relief and fear. He held her, their breaths mingling, hearts racing, the world pressing down yet powerless against the force of what they'd found. Silence stretched, heavy but comforting. The storm outside a distant echo to the tempest between them. They were both broken and whole, desperate and found, tethered by irrevocable choice. The enemies escalated. A rival barged into the penthouse with threats and ultimatums, voice harsh, eyes calculating. Alexander stood protectively in front of her, chest heaving, eyes dark as midnight. Every instinct screamed danger, yet he exuded calm ferocity. Her hand slipped into his, a lifeline in chaos, grounding, human, intimate. "No one touches her," he said, voice low, lethal, commanding. The intruder froze, weighing consequences. Rain pelted the windows, thunder punctuating tension. She pressed closer, cheek against his chest, and the electricity between them made everything else vanish. The world demanded sacrifice, submission, compromised, but for once they could meet the storm together. Every threat, every challenge, heightened desire, cemented connection, and confirmed the impossibility of their separation. The night deepened, and exhaustion mingled with relief. They found quiet in the study, curls of steam rising from mugs, hands intertwined, bodies close. "We survived," she whispered, voice soft, trembling. He kissed the crown of her head, heartbeat in sync, breathing a promise of more storms weathered together. Outside, the city moved, unaware. Inside, every look, every touch carried confessions of a love that had burned through fear and secrecy. They spoke in whispers, laughter punctuating tension, unspoken vows binding them. Every second became sacred, stolen from the chaos, and every touch lingered, marking them in ways the world could never touch. For the first time, surrender felt like salvation, intimacy like power, and love like victory. Morning broke, but the world outside remained unforgiving. Alexander stepped onto the balcony, Rain's slick hair, suit-soaked, eyes scanning the horizon. She appeared behind him, hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "It's over," she whispered, uncertainty mingling with hope. He shook his head slowly, gaze fixed on the skyline. "No," he said, "it's just beginning. You're my beginning." She smiled, relief and disbelief warring in her chest, fingers brushed, electricity igniting nerves. The contract, the pressures, the enemies all meaningless beside them. The storm had broken, but the fire between them raged fiercer than ever. Unstoppable, untamed, unbound. They would face the world together. He chose her. She chose him. And nothing, not wealth, threat, nor time, could undo that. At dawn they finally embraced, rain dripping, city lights fading, breath mingled, hearts racing, every muscle attuned to the other. "I thought I couldn't survive this without losing you," she admitted, voice small. Alexander pressed a kiss to her forehead, hands trembling, eyes wet. "You don't lose me," he said, certainty in every word. "Ever." They stood there, wet, soaked to the bone, the storm outside echoing the one they'd survived within, and for the first time, there was no fear, no compromise, no hesitation, only them, only love, only choice. The world could try to claim them, but they would not be moved. Not now, not ever. The final hours before the Empire's deadline became irrelevant. Alexander shredded the contract, letting papers flutter to the floor like leaves in a storm. She watched, heart in her throat, as he destroyed what everyone expected him to protect. "You matter more than all of this," he said, voice low, final. Tears blurred her vision, hope and disbelief mingling. "You matter more than me, than the world, than duty," he added, fingers brushing her face, lips finding hers in a kiss that sealed their rebellion, their surrender, their victory. Outside, rain washed the city clean. Inside, their hearts beat as one, irreversibly, fiercely, forever. The storm had ended, but they had found eternity in the chaos. Sunlight spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching dust motes in the penthouse as if the city itself had paused to witness them. She stood in the bed, hair tousled, eyelashes wet from sleep or tears or perhaps both. Alexander moved quietly, slippers whispering against marble, hands deft as he prepared coffee with the precision of a man who had once measured life in contracts and boardrooms. The aroma drifted through the room, mingling with the lingering scent of her perfume, cinnamon and warmth and home. She watched him from the bed, chest rising and falling slowly, and realized with a rush of wonder that this quiet intimacy was theirs. No obligations, no enemies, no deadlines, just them. And the gentle certainty that he was choosing her every morning, in every gesture, in every smile. She let herself breathe, letting the city noise fall away, feeling finally, profoundly, completely safe. He carried the mugs to the balcony. The skyline sprawled like a silver river below. She joined him, bare feet on cold marble, clinging to the warmth of his arm as he handed her the cup. Their fingers brushed, lingering, familiar and new at once. "Do you remember the first night it rained?" he asked, voice soft, teasing. She laughed, a sound that carried over rooftops, full and alive. "How could I forget?" she said. He pulled her close, chest to chest, and the weight of their journey pressed around them, not heavy but grounding. For once, every choice had led them exactly here, and every storm had been worth it. They sipped coffee in silence, shared glances punctuated with laughter and touches, learning the rhythm of a love no longer stolen, but freely given. Later, he traced her hand along the marble countertop, watching the sunlight catch her skin. "I think," he said slowly, deliberately, "I've been living half a life without knowing what mattered." She turned, curiosity softening the edges of her tired expression. "And now," she whispered. His thumb brushed her knuckles, a slow, intimate gesture. "Now," he said, "I know. It's you. Always been you." She smiled, heart swelling, realizing that the man who had once sworn never to love had surrendered not in desperation, but in clarity. The empire waited below. The world demanded everything, yet he had chosen her, unflinchingly, irrevocably, and in that moment she understood she was not his diversion, nor his escape. She was his center, his gravity, the woman who had saved the part of him he didn't know was lost. They spent the afternoon in quiet motion, cooking together in the expansive kitchen, sunlight pooling over counters, laughter echoing off the walls. She accidentally splashed him with a bit of cream, and he caught her wrist gently, holding it to his chest. "I think you do this on purpose," he said, eyes twinkling, voice warm. "Maybe," she teased, leaning into his warmth. Every small action, the brushing of hair from his forehead, the way he poured her tea exactly how she liked it, the shared smiles over a burnt pastry was intimacy magnified, a tapestry of ordinary moments that now felt monumental. The penthouse no longer seemed cavernous or impersonal. It had become their sanctuary, a world shaped by love instead of contracts, a home built on trust, laughter and quiet, enduring devotion. The evening brought the city lights alive, spilling gold and violet across the windows. Alexander pulled her close on the balcony again, the skyline a silent witness to their newfound peace. He held her as though the world beyond those lights might try to intrude, but he had learned what mattered most. She rested her head against his chest, heart synchronized with his. "Do you ever think about how we began?" she asked softly. He chuckled, voice low, brushing hair from her temple. "Every day," he said, "and I still think about that storm, how it changed everything." She smiled, warmth flooding her chest, realizing that the chaos that once threatened to destroy them had forged a love far stronger than either could have anticipated. That night, they lay on the balcony, wrapped in a shared blanket, stars reflected in the glass around them. He slipped a small box from his pocket, hands trembling slightly despite the calm night. "This is nothing like our beginning," he said, voice sincere. She opened it slowly, revealing a delicate ring, simple yet radiant. "I don't need gold, Alexander, I need us," she said, voice soft, trembling. He took her hand, placing the ring gently on her finger. "Then this is for us," he whispered. "Not contracts, not obligations. Just us, forever." She looked at him, tears of joy glistening, and realized this moment, unlike their first Rainstorm encounter, was theirs by choice, pure and untainted. Morning after the proposal, she found him making breakfast, shirt sleeves rolled, focused but humming softly. The sight of him, ordinary and intimate, struck her with sudden clarity. Here he was, not the untouchable billionaire, not the man shaped by power, but a man who loved her, wholly, unreservedly. She slid her hand into his, watching him laugh at some trivial kitchen mishap. "I think I like this version of you," she whispered. He glanced down, smile slow and deep, eyes soft. "I think I've been waiting for this version of myself," he said, and for the first time she saw the man she loved fully realized, capable of empire, danger, desire, and above all, unwavering devotion. They spent the day in small acts of domesticity, rearranging flowers, reading on the chaise lounge, sharing chocolate in stolen moments between laughter and quiet conversation. Every glance carried history, every touch carried meaning. She realized, with a thrill that made her chest ache, that she had become not just the woman who captured his attention, but the one who anchored his soul. No contracts dictated these moments. No storms pressed urgency. Just two hearts choosing each other over and over, in a world where nothing else could matter. The penthouse, once cold and intimidating, had become a home built of love, of memory, of resilience. Night fell, and Alexander led her to the balcony once more, city lights sparkling like jewels below. He held her close, cheek pressed to her hair, warmth and scent mingling. "Do you remember?" he murmured, voiced low, "the fear we had, the chaos we thought would destroy us?" She nodded, chest rising and falling with his. "I thought we'd never survive it all." He kissed the crown of her head, whispering, "And yet here we are, stronger, whole, together." Tears pricked her eyes as she realized that love had not only survived the storm but had been forged by it, resilient and untouchable. The next morning, she found a letter on the kitchen counter, in his precise handwriting. It was an acknowledgement of all they had endured, every challenge, every fear, every threat that had tried to separate them. She smiled softly, tracing the words with her fingers, feeling the weight of each line. Every danger had been a test, every stolen moment, a gift. She realized that the chaos of their beginning had transformed into a lifetime of devotion. Every contract had become irrelevant. Every storm had become a lesson. She folded the letter, pressing it to her heart, and knew with certainty that the man before her had given her everything, not just love, but sanctuary, trust, and the promise of forever. Afternoons became filled with walks along the balcony, watching the sun dip behind the skyline, hand in hand. They shared quiet conversations, laughter spilling between them, bodies pressed together in simple yet profound gestures. Alexander would brush her hair from her face. She would trace the line of his jaw, every touch a reaffirmation, every glance a vow. In these moments, no boardroom intruded, no family demanded, no enemy threatened. They were simply two people who had survived storms together, and whose love was now untouchable. She realized that their beginning, filled with chaos and rain, had led to this quiet perfection, and she allowed herself to savor it fully, entirely. Evenings brought music and candles, quiet dances in the living room, laughter mingling with soft conversation. He held her, fingers entwined, and whispered promises he could now keep: presence, devotion, eternity. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and felt the culmination of everything they had endured. The past, the threats, the contracts, they had all led to this intimacy, to a love that was deliberate, chosen, and unshakable. They were no longer strangers, no longer bound by circumstance. They had become each other's world, and in that quiet golden hour, she understood what it meant to be home. Late night, she leaned against him on the balcony, city lights shimmering below, a soft wind carrying distant sounds of life. "I never imagined love could feel like this," she whispered. He smiled, pressing his lips to her hair. "Neither did I," he replied, voice gentle, certain. "It's everything we survived, everything we chose that made it possible." She closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm of his breath, the warmth of his body, the depth of his devotion. The world below could roar. Storms could come and go, but here, together, they had created something unassailable, tender, and real. The proposal had been the first chapter. The mornings, afternoons, and nights became the story unfolding. She sipped coffee in the kitchen. He held her hand across the counter, their laughter soft and unhurried. Every look carried memory, every touch carried meaning. She realized fully that the man who once claimed he could never love had given her everything: his heart, his trust, his life, and she gave back the same, completely, irrevocably, tenderly. The empire, the contracts, the chaos, they had been rewritten, transformed into a life of devotion. On the balcony, city lights casting silver reflections across their faces. He wrapped his arms around her, chest to chest, warmth and heartbeat a steady anchor. She whispered softly, "I never want another storm." He laughed, low and content. "Neither do I, but I'll weather any for you." She smiled against him, feeling the depth of survival, choice, and love. The skyline stretched endlessly, but their world had contracted to this, to each other. Every storm had led to this stillness, every threat to this peace. They were no longer strangers caught in a tempest. They were the calm after, the sanctuary, the impossible made real. Their love lingered, radiant, permanent, unshakable. She tilted her head, lips brushing his shoulder, eyes bright with wonder. "You've turned contracts into gifts," she murmured. He smiled like never before, a slow, deep grin. "And strangers into worlds," he replied, voice soft, full of everything they had survived. She pressed closer, feeling his heartbeat steady. "Safe, forever," she whispered. "Forever," he echoed. The city below continued, unaware, but they remained suspended in the perfect equilibrium of love, choice, and hard-earned happiness. The storm was over. Their world had begun.